It was just another ordinary night at the small-town diner. Plates clinking, the hum of quiet conversations, and the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. Emily had been on her feet for hours, moving from table to table with a tired but practiced smile. She had worked here for years, balancing trays, refilling drinks, and exchanging pleasantries with customers who came and went without a second thought. It wasn't the kind of job that paid well, but it was honest work, and for now, it was what kept the bills from piling up too high. That night, the diner wasn't particularly busy. Just a few regulars, a couple of truckers passing through, and a lone man sitting in the far corner booth. He was quiet, keeping to himself, occasionally glancing up from his notepad, as if deep in thought. Emily noticed him, but didn't think much of it. People came in all the time, looking lost in their own world. She had learned not to ask too many questions. She walked over to his table, setting down his steaming cup of coffee. "Anything else I can get you?" she asked, her voice friendly but worn. The man looked up, offering a small smile. "No, this is perfect. Thank you." Emily nodded and walked away, letting him be. Something about him was different though. He wasn't dressed like the usual customers who passed through. His clothes were neat but simple, and there was a quiet kindness in his eyes. He wasn't scrolling through his phone like most people did. Instead, he kept writing, occasionally sipping his coffee. An hour passed, and Emily was starting to count down the minutes until closing time. She glanced at the man's table, expecting to see him still sitting there, but he was gone. In his place was the check, neatly tucked under the salt shaker. With a sigh, she picked it up. Just another table, just another bill to clear, and then she saw it. Her heart nearly stopped. A $1,000 tip. Her hands trembled as she stared at the crisp $100 bills stacked beneath the check. It had to be a mistake, a joke maybe, but there, scribbled on the back of the receipt, was a note. It read, "This isn't just a tip. It's a sign. Use it well." Emily's mind raced. Who was this man? Why would he leave her this kind of money? Was it some kind of test? A prank? She looked around, but he was long gone. The diner was nearly empty now, and the only sound was the low buzz of the radio, playing an old song in the background. She could feel her pulse in her ears as she turned the note over, as if expecting more. But that was it. Just those few words. Simple, yet heavy with meaning. She should have been excited. This was more money than she had seen in a long time. It could cover rent, groceries, maybe even give her a little breathing room. But instead of relief, all she felt was an unshakable sense of mystery. Who was he? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning? Little did Emily know that note wasn't just a random act of kindness. It was the start of something much, much bigger, something that would change the course of her life forever. And by the time she figured it out, there would be no going back. Emily sat in the break room, long after her shift had ended, staring at the note in her hands. The crisp bills were still, folded neatly on the table beside her, untouched, as if moving them would somehow make the whole thing feel real. She kept reading the words over and over again. This isn't just a tip. It's a sign. Use it well. A sign. A sign for what? Her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe the man had mistaken her for someone else. Maybe he was some kind of wealthy traveler who liked to leave big tips for no reason. But that didn't explain the note. It felt personal, intentional, like he knew something she didn't. For the next few days, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening. She caught herself glancing at the diner door, half expecting the man to return and explain himself, but he never did. The money sat in an envelope on her kitchen counter. It was tempting, so tempting. The overdue electric bill, the rent that was barely covered by her paychecks, the groceries she had to carefully budget for. It could all be fixed in an instant, and yet something held her back. Emily wasn't the kind of person to believe in fate or signs, but for the first time in her life, she felt like this moment meant something. She just didn't know what. One evening, as she was wiping down the counter after another long shift, an old regular, Mr. Reynolds, sat at his usual stool. He was a kind man, always ordering the same thing: a black coffee and a grilled cheese, extra crispy. He had been coming to the diner for as long as Emily had worked there. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," he said, stirring his coffee slowly. Emily hesitated, then sighed. "Yeah, just trying to figure something out." Mr. Reynolds chuckled. "Well, figuring things out is overrated. Sometimes you just gotta take a leap." His words stuck with her as she walked home that night. A leap. Maybe that was what the note meant. Maybe this was her chance to change something in her life. But what? The next morning, she woke up with a decision. She wasn't going to spend the money on rent or bills. She was going to use it for something bigger, something meaningful. She started researching local charities, community projects, anything that might give her a clue as to what she should do. And then she found it. A fundraiser for a struggling family in town, a single mother, just like Emily's own mother had been, trying to keep her kids fed and housed after losing her job. It hit her like a wave. She remembered the nights when her own mom had gone to bed, hungry just to make sure Emily had enough to eat. The stress, the fear, the feeling of always being one step away from losing everything. Maybe this was what she was supposed to do. She took a deep breath and made the donation, anonymously, and that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. A week later, she was closing up the diner when she noticed a familiar figure standing outside. The man from that night, the one who had left the tip. Her heart pounded as she stepped outside. He was leaning against the street lamp, hands in his pockets, watching her with a quiet smile. "You used it well," he said. Emily froze. "How do you know?" His smile widened just a little. "Because I was meant to find you, and you were meant to do exactly what you did." Her breath caught in her throat. "Who are you?" The man studied her for a moment before responding. "Someone who's been where you are. Someone who was given a sign once too." She didn't know what to say. It felt like she had walked into a story bigger than herself, like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't quite see. And then he said something that sent chills down her spine. "This isn't over yet." Before she could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Emily stood there, the cold air biting at her skin, her mind racing with questions. What had she just gotten herself into? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning? Emily stood there long after the man had disappeared, his words replaying in her mind. "This isn't over yet." What did he mean? She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his quiet smile, the way he seemed to know more than he was saying. She thought about the money, the note, the choice she had made to help someone else, instead of keeping it for herself. Had that been some kind of test? And if it was, what came next? The next day, something strange happened. When Emily arrived at the diner, a small white envelope was waiting for her at the front counter. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting. She hesitated before picking it up, her heart pounding. No one ever left her notes. She slowly peeled it open. Inside was a single piece of paper. "You did the right thing, but there's more work to do. Meet me at the park bench near the old bookstore at 6 p.m. No name, no explanation. Just that." Emily stared at the note, 1,000 thoughts racing through her head. Was this from him? The man from the diner. Part of her thought she should ignore it. Maybe it was crazy to follow a stranger's message. But another part of her, some deep, unshakable instinct, told her this was something she needed to do. So that evening, just as the sun was setting, she made her way to the park. The bench near the old bookstore was empty when she got there. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap, trying to ignore the nervous energy buzzing through her. Minutes passed. Then, footsteps. She turned to see him, the man from the diner, walking toward her, the same calm expression on his face. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, sitting down beside her. Emily exhaled sharply. "I don't even know why I'm here." He studied her for a moment before reaching into his pocket and pulling out another envelope. He handed it to her. She took it cautiously and opened it. Inside was another stack of bills, more than last time, maybe double. Her breath caught in her throat. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you understand," he said simply. Emily shook her head. "Understand what?" "That sometimes the smallest kindness can change everything," he said. "You proved that when you gave away the money. You didn't hesitate. You trusted that someone else needed it more than you. And because of that, I know you're the right person for this." She looked down at the money, her fingers tightening around the envelope. "What am I supposed to do with this?" He smiled. "Whatever your heart tells you." Emily let out a shaky breath. "And then what? You disappear. Again?" His expression softened. "I was once where you are. Someone helped me when I needed it most, and I promised I'd pay it forward. Now it's your turn. This isn't about me. It's about you, and what you choose to do next." She felt something shift inside her, like a door opening she hadn't even known was there. For so long, life had felt like something that just happened to her. Bills, work, exhaustion. It was all just survival. But now she had a choice. A chance to be part of something bigger than herself. She didn't know where this would lead or how far it would go. But for the first time in a long time, she believed, not in luck, not in coincidence, but in the power of one simple act of kindness. And as she looked up at the man, she realized something. Maybe this was the sign she had been waiting for all along.